The phone buzzed once, rattling the granite like a trapped moth. Elijah's text lit the dark kitchen, working late on the Meridian deal. Don't wait up. Same phrase, same clipped tone. I read it twice, then a third time, thumb hovering. 40 years of marriage, and I still knew his coffee order by heart. 2 sugars, splash of oat milk, no foam. He'd mocked oat milk last month, called it peasant swill. But I poured it anyway. Old habits die harder than trust, I suppose. I measured the grounds into the French press, the one we bought on our honeymoon in Provence. The scent rose, dark and familiar, curling like smoke from a fire I no longer tended. Thermos in hand, I grabbed my navy wool coat, the one with the tiny moth hole near the hem he never noticed. Keys, purse, silence. The house felt too large, echoing with the ghosts of laughter that stopped belonging to me years ago. The drive downtown was a ribbon of empty asphalt. Street lights smeared gold across the windshield, then vanished. His tower rose ahead, 42 stories of polished ego, pitch black. Not a single window glowed. The lobby security light flickered, weak and yellow, like a dying star refusing to go out. I circled the garage twice, no silver Mercedes, no Vance 1 plate gleaming under the fluorescence, just oil stains and echoes. My pulse thumped in my throat. I opened the family GPS app, the one Elijah insisted on after Jamal's car was stolen in '09. Safety first, Simone. His dot pulsed red, 20 miles east, in Willow Crest, a suburb where lawns went unmowed and porch lights stayed on for no one. I turned the wheel without thinking. The thermos sloshed, coffee cooling like the promises he'd made. Willow Crest smelled of wet leaves and wood smoke. I slowed past sagging picket fences, mailboxes leaning like tired soldiers. Number 412. Brick, 2 stories, 1 upstairs window, glowing soft gold. Lace curtains, the kind my mother used to starch on Sundays. I parked beneath a maple, engine off, heart loud enough to wake the dead. I crossed the street on legs that didn't feel mine. Dew soaked my ankles, cold seeping through silk stockings. The window was low enough. I didn't need to stand on tiptoe. There she was, snow-white hair twisted loosely with a silver clip. Dark blue velvet robe, collar high, sleeves long, catching lamplight like midnight water. Margaret Lowell laughed, a sound like wind chimes in winter. Delicate, unexpected, free. Elijah knelt beside her wingback chair. My husband in charcoal cashmere, the sweater I'd knitted during Amara's appendicitis scare. He poured wine with steady hands, crystal glass catching the light. The bottle, 1945 Chateau Margaux. I knew the label, knew the year. Her birth year. He'd bragged about sourcing it at auction. A tribute to legacy. Legacy, not ours. He set the bottle down, took her hand, knuckles mapped with age spots, veins like indigo rivers under parchment skin, and kissed it. Slow, deliberate, eyes closed, not drunken, not pity, devotion. The kind he'd never shown me, not even on our wedding day when the photographer begged for just one more smile. My wedding ring, white gold, 3 tiny diamonds, suddenly felt like ice. I twisted it off, the band leaving a pale groove after 40 years. Into my coat pocket it went, clinking softly against loose change. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I stood in the shadows, breath fogging the glass, watching the man who'd sworn till death worship at another altar. The laugh again, hers, then his, low and warm. The sound he used to save for boardroom victories. I backed away, grass squelching, until the glow faded behind me. The car door shut with a soft thunk. Engine on. Headlights off until the corner. I drove home in silence, windows down, October air whipping my hair into knots, the image branded behind my eyelids, his lips on her hand, her smile like sunrise after my endless night. The mansion gates opened automatically. sensors recognizing the car, even if the man inside it no longer recognized me. I left the thermos on the passenger seat, coffee stone cold, lid still sealed. Inside, the grandfather clock struck 2. I didn't flinch. The ring stayed in my pocket, a small, hard secret against my heart. I left the ring in the coat pocket and walked straight to the study, the one with the oak desk Elijah polished every Sunday like a trophy he'd won from the world. His laptop sat closed, lid dusted with neglect since he'd upgraded to the office model 3 years ago. I flipped it open. The screen woke with a soft chime, blue light washing the room. Password prompt blinked. I typed Vance Legacy 1960, his birth year. The code he'd bragged was unbreakable at a gala while I stood silent beside him in borrowed pearls. Click. Desktop loaded. Same wallpaper. Him shaking hands with the governor, both men grinning like they owned the sky. I hated that photo. Still do. I started with the phone bill, the one routed to his personal email because business and pleasure should never mix, Simone. ML appeared like a bruise across the screen, night after night. 11:07 p.m. to 2:43 a.m., 12 to 12 a.m. to 3:17 a.m., 1:59 a.m. to 4:02 a.m., 27 months of midnight confessions while I folded his monogrammed shirts and pretended his late nights were mergers. Not Margaret. I scrolled until the dates blurred, until the numbers felt like teeth gnawing at the edges of my sanity. My finger trembled on the trackpad, but I kept clicking, each call a small betrayal etched in digital ink. Next, the credit card portal. Login. His initials, my birthday, the combination he mocked as sentimental nonsense, the year Amara turned 16. Statements cascaded down the screen like a guilty waterfall. Le Ciel went $400. Client Entertainment. La Mer, $12,100. Same tag. The Violet Room, $3,800 for 2. Charity planning dinner. The same nights the call logs glowed red. I printed each page. The machine whirred like an angry bee in the corner, spitting evidence onto the Persian rug he'd bought in Istanbul to impress investors who never learned my first name. I smelled the ink before I saw the stack. Hot, chemical, final. I knelt, gathered the pages, aligned the edges with the precision he'd taught me for boardroom packets. Then, the bank wires. I had to dig into the business account, the one I'd co-signed without reading because, "Trust, Simone, trust," he'd said, kissing my forehead like I was a child. There it was, 1.2 million to the Margaret Trust, Grand Cayman. Memo line, charity partnership. I laughed, one sharp bark that echoed off the leather-bound bookshelves. Charity. The word tasted like rust and spoiled wine. I found the property folder buried in a subdirectory labeled Legacy Assets, the same folder where he kept the kids' college funds. Deed for a lake house in the Adirondacks, transferred to Margaret Lowell 6 months ago, recorded the week I was in bed with the flu. In return, a vineyard in Napa, 40 acres of rolling green. Title now under Elijah's name alone, signed the day after our 39th anniversary. Marital assets, swapped like baseball cards, while I planned his birthday menu and asked the caterer to hide the shellfish because his cousin was allergic. My phone buzzed against my hip. Unknown number. I answered on the second ring. Sterling here. Package at the side gate. No signature. I slipped out the French doors, gravel crunching under slippers, night air sharp with cut grass and wood smoke. A manila envelope waited on the bench beneath the hydrangeas. No note, just wait. Thumb drive inside, labeled in blue marker, indigo files. I clutched it like contraband, pulse matching the crickets. Back at the desk, I plugged it in. Photos loaded, hundreds. Each one a fresh cut. Elijah pushing a pearl grey wheelchair along the Seine, Margaret's head tilted toward his, foreheads touching under the Eiffel Tower's glow. Another, them on a yacht off Capri, her hand on his cheek, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen, even the night Jamal was born. I zoomed until pixels broke, searching for trick lighting, Photoshop errors, anything to call it fake. Nothing. Real. My hands shook so hard the cursor jittered like a trapped moth. I created a new cloud folder, birthday gift, password protected with my mother's maiden name, the one Elijah erased from our wedding invitations. Drag, drop, copy. Every statement, every deed, every stolen kiss. The progress bar crawled, 47%, 73%, 100%. Done. I ejected the drive, slipped it into the same pocket as the ring. 2 secrets, side by side. Metal and plastic. Cold against my thigh. I needed distance, air that didn't smell like his cologne soaked into the walls. I opened an incognito tab, searched boutique hotels downtown. The Riverview Suites. Quiet, discreet, Riverview. I booked the Corner King under Simone Voss. No spaces, no hyphen, no misses. The confirmation email pinged, subject line, "Welcome home." First time in 40 years, my name stood alone. It looked right, like a door I'd forgotten existed. I packed a small overnight bag, toothbrush, 1 change of clothes, the indigo scarf Amara gave me for Christmas, the one Elijah said clashed with the decor. I left the mansion lights on, timers set for the cleaning crew at dawn. The drive to the hotel took 12 minutes. City lights smearing across the windshield like wet paint. I valet parked, took the key card, rode to the 8th floor in silence. Elevator music, a soft jazz version of a song we danced to at our wedding. The room smelled of lemon polish and fresh linen. Possibility sharp as cut citrus. I locked the door, leaned against it. Let the bag slide to the carpet with a soft thud. Bathroom mirror. Harsh fluorescence carving shadows under my eyes. I faced myself, really looked. Grey threading my temples, lines he'd called character when they were still faint, now deep as canyons. I lifted the corners of my mouth, not warm, not cold, practiced, again, until the smile stayed, steady, a mask I could wear without cracking. Rehearsal for the night the world would see me. Not the wife, not the shadow, but Simone. I whispered to the reflection, 3 weeks until the party, 3 weeks until the truth wears indigo. The woman in the glass nodded back, eyes sharp, ready. The hotel phone jolted me awake at 7:03 a.m., shrill enough to rattle the ice bucket. "Mom, it's Jamal. I'm at the side gate. Let me in before the gardeners start staring." His voice cracked on the last syllable, red-eye gravel mixed with something raw. I threw on yesterday's blouse, still carrying faint river mist, and drove back through fog that clung to the windshield like unspoken accusations. Jamal waited under the portico in a charcoal suit 2 shades darker than his mood, tie hanging loose like a noose he'd given up tightening. 5 o'clock shadow at 7, eyes bloodshot from a DC flight that probably served warm gin and broken promises. He dropped his roller bag, wheels clacking on marble, and hugged me so hard my ribs protested. "You okay?" he whispered into my hair, breath smelling of airport coffee. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway because mothers lie when the truth is too heavy. Amara's silver Prius squealed in minutes later, tires spitting gravel like gossip. She climbed out clutching a pink bakery box, powdered sugar already snowing onto her black blazer. "Artisanal donuts," she announced, voice pitched too high, the way it got when she was spinning damage control. "Maple bacon and lavender glaze. Remember Sunday mornings when Dad let us lick the beaters and pretended he wasn't sneaking bites?" The sugar smell slammed me back to braided rugs and cartoon pajamas before the Vance table turned into a courtroom and love got served with a side of contempt. We filed into the dining room, the long mahogany table where Elijah once carved prime rib and carved me down with every toast about my devoted wife. I laid out the evidence in surgical piles, call logs printed on pale blue paper, credit card slips curling at the edges, bank wires highlighted in angry yellow, property deeds crisp as fresh wounds, Sterling's photos fanned like a deck of losing cards. The printer pages smelled of hot toner and finality. Jamal went straight for the bank statements, legal mind slicing numbers like a scalpel through fat. Commingled assets, he muttered, finger underlining the $1.2 million wire. Marital funds funneled offshore. Cayman registry, classic tax evasion markers. He's not just cheating, Mom, he's cooking the books. His knuckles went white on the page. The lawyer voice stayed flat, but the paper trembled. Amara snatched the Paris photo. Elijah's forehead touching Margaret's under Eiffel Tower sparkle. We control the narrative, she fired, PR instincts flaring hot. Phone already open to a blank notes app. Or the tabloids will. #Tark Silver Fox scandal trends by lunch, Grannygate by dinner. We pick the frame. Sympathetic widow or predatory heiress? She paced, heels stabbing the rug, voice climbing. We seed the story before TMZ does. Jamal rounded on her, chair scraping. He's still Dad, Mara. Little League, graduations. The time he flew to Boston while Mom sat alone in the ER with appendicitis. Amara cut in, words sharp as broken glass. You gonna defend the lake house he deeded away while she planned his 60th with a 102 fever? Lower your voice, I warned, but my own cracked like thin ice over deep water. They kept at it, loyalty versus justice, voices overlapping, donuts forgotten, and sweating in the box. Jamal. He taught me to tie a tie. Amara. He taught Mom to disappear. Until I raised one hand, palm flat, the way I used to stop them fighting over the last pancake. Silence dropped heavy as wet wool. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the voice memo I'd found buried in Elijah's cloud backup, mislabeled Q3 projections. I pressed play. Volume low, but the room was small enough. Elijah's whisper, tinny and intimate. Once the old bat signs the revised trust, the empire is ours. Simone won't notice until it's too late. She never does. She's too busy polishing silver nobody uses. Jamal's jaw locked so tight I heard the click, a sound like a gavel in my head. Amara's eyes hardened, mascara smudging as she blinked fast, once, twice, then stopped. The air shifted. Something broke open. No more debate. The siblings looked at me, then at each other, and chose. Their mother, finally. The word hung unspoken, but loud as thunder. We migrated to the study at midnight, the house creaking around us like an old ship taking on water. Coffee went cold in 3 chipped mugs, the ones Elijah banished to the back cupboard for being too casual. Printer hummed like a war drum, spitting divorce papers, asset freeze motions, board resolutions, each page a bullet. Jamal typed clauses in legalese that sounded like Latin curses. Amara annotated press release drafts in red pen, arrows and exclamation points like battle plans. I sat between them, USB drive warm in my palm, ring still in my pocket. At 2:07 a.m. the final page slid out, still hot from the laser. Simone Voss, printed in bold, no misses, no hyphen. I uncapped the indigo fountain pen I'd bought on impulse in Florence 20 years ago, the one Elijah called gaudy, and hid in a drawer. The nib scratched across the signature line, first swirl of color, in a marriage-gone grayscale. The ink bled slightly, like a bruise blooming, but it held, deep and permanent. Jamal exhaled, long and shaky, fogging his glasses. It's done, Mum. Court opens at 9. We file first thing. Amara squeezed my shoulder, nails digging in just enough to ground me. Now we make sure the whole room sees the color, not the cage. I capped the pen, laid it beside the stack like a loaded weapon. My children, my fierce, flawed, furious children, had listened. And for the first time in decades, the mahogany table felt like mine, not his throne. The invitations arrived in thick cream envelopes, gold foil embossed like royal decrees. Celebrating 65 years of Elijah Vance. I slit one open with the sterling letter opener he'd gifted me on our 20th anniversary, the blade now dull from slicing open lies thicker than wedding cake. Inside, the cardstock felt heavier than our marriage vows, heavier than the silence that had settled between us, like dust on forgotten china. I stacked them on the foyer table one by one, lining them up like tiny tombstones in perfect rows. Click, click, click. Each envelope sealed with wax-stamped V for Vance, V for Vanity. Florists swarmed the grand staircase at the crack of dawn, arms overflowing with white orchids, Elijah's so-called symbol of purity. They wove the blooms through the balustrade, delicate stems trembling as if they already sensed the rot beneath the marble. One petal fluttered down, bruised purple at the edge. The lead florist, a woman with calloused hands and kind eyes, winced when a stem snapped clean in half. "Sorry, Mom," she muttered. I pretended not to notice the parallel, but my throat tightened all the same. Purity. What a joke. In the kitchen, caterers spooned beluga onto mother-of-pearl spoons, the caviar glistening like black pearls of indulgence under the pendant lights. The head chef, Marco, tall, tattooed, and perpetually sweating, caught my eye across the stainless steel island. He remembered my shellfish allergy from the engagement party 40 years ago, when Elijah had laughed and said, "She'll eat around it, won't you, darling?" Without a word, Marco swapped the blinis for paper-thin cucumber rounds, a quiet kindness that lodged in my chest like a warm stone. I nodded once. He nodded back. No fuss. Just decency in a house starved of it. Upstairs in his dressing room with the mahogany paneling and the mirror framed in gold leaf, Elijah stood practicing humility he'd never learned. "Simone has been my rock," he murmured, adjusting his onyx cufflinks with manicured fingers. Her quiet strength, her unwavering devotion. He paused, frowned at his reflection, tried again with a softer smile. "Behind every great man." The words curdled in the air like milk left in the sun. I watched from the doorway, half hidden by the jam, arms crossed tight. He caught my reflection and flashed the smile that used to make my knees weak, the one that once convinced me I was lucky. Now it just made them steady. I turned away before he could speak. I slipped into the guest suite I'd quietly claimed as war room, the one with the faded rose wallpaper and the lock that actually worked. Laid across the bed, the midnight blue gown, silk like liquid night, custom made with hidden pockets sewn inside the lining, deep enough for the remote trigger and a spare battery. I ran my fingers over the fabric, cool, weightless, lethal. I slid the slim black device into the left pocket, felt its edges press against my hip like a promise I intended to keep. Jamal arrived at dusk, rolling in with a briefcase heavy enough to make his shoulder dip. "Legal servers," he whispered, voice low, eyes darting to the hallway, disguised as vintage Bordeaux crates, 82 Lafite, Dad's favorite. He hefted one down the stone steps to the wine cellar, dust motes dancing in the flashlight beam. "Cool, dark, and nobody counts bottles at a party," he said, wiping cobwebs from his sleeve. "By the time the board logs in tomorrow, every transfer, every email, every offshore account will be mirrored and locked." Amara followed in a caterer's black vest, name tag reading Maria in block letters. She winked, tucked 3 press badges into her apron pocket, and adjusted the earpiece disguised as a hearing aid. "Reporters in uniform, Mum. Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and that blogger who owes me a favor. They'll blend until we say go." One nod, and the floodgates open. She tapped her phone twice, screen lighting her face in cold blue. "Live stream ready, #locked and loaded." The orchestra tuned in the ballroom at twilight, violins sighing into the vaulted ceiling, like ghosts clearing their throats. The first violinist, a young woman with sharp cheekbones and Margaret's unmistakable eyes, drew her bow across the strings. A single pure note floated up, sweet and lethal, like perfume laced with arsenic. Margaret's grand niece. Elijah had no idea. I'd found her through Sterling. booked her through a shell agency. The girl glanced at me, gave the tiniest nod. Blood recognizing blood, even if it wasn't mine. I stood alone in the bedroom, slipped the gown over my head, fabric whispering down like a verdict. I hung my mother's locket inside the neckline, the oval silver warm from my palm. Inside, her photo, faded but fierce, eyes that never bowed, and a curl of my baby hair, dark as indigo. I fastened the clasp. It settled against my sternum, a secret heartbeat thumping in time with the new rhythm I'd found. Mine, mine, mine. At 5:12 a.m., while the house still slept off yesterday's pretense, I walked the ballroom alone. Heels silent on the marble, I memorized exits, French doors to the terrace, frosted glass catching moonlight, service corridor behind the orchestra, narrow and dim, the dumbwaiter nobody used since the 80s, brass handle cold under my fingers. I traced escape routes like a general before battle, counting steps, noting shadows, measuring angles of light. If things went south, I'd vanish before the first scream. I stopped beneath the chandelier, head tilted back. 1,000 crystals fractured the first blush of sunrise into shards of pink and gold, future shards of a broken dynasty, I thought, and the image lodged in my chest, bright and sharp as broken glass. I stood there, gown pooling like spilled ink, letting the light cut across my face. No more hiding in corners, no more shrinking to fit his frame. Tonight, the mansion would bury its own king, and I would dance on the grave. The first limousine glided up the drive at 6:47 p.m., sharp, headlights slicing dusk like hot knives through butter. Then another and another, black cats on velvet paws, doors yawning open to spill perfume clouds, so thick I could taste gardenia, oud, and the metallic tang of fresh Botox. Diamonds flashed under the porte-cochere like paparazzi bulbs. Laughter tinkled like crystal wind chimes about to snap in a storm. Every cheek kissed the air beside mine, never quite touching, just the way Delphine taught them 40 years ago. I stood at the entrance in midnight blue silk, remote snug in my hidden pocket, greeting cousins who'd mocked my catalogue taste since Reagan was president. Same smiles, same teeth, same venom dressed up in couture. Elijah's sister Delphine sailed past in champagne chiffon that probably cost more than most people's mortgages, eyes raking my gown from neckline to hem like she was grading livestock. "Still so simple, Simone," she purred, voice dripping honey over broken glass. Same insult for 40 years. Just a new wrinkle framing the mouth and a new tremor in the hand holding the clutch. She patted my arm with gloved fingers, rings cold as her heart, diamond knuckles grazing my skin like frostbite. I smiled back, teeth only, and felt the remote pulse like a second heart against my hip. Tick, tick, tick. "Keep talking, Delphine. Your words are kindling." Inside the ballroom, chandeliers blazed like 1,000 tiny suns, prisms throwing rainbows across white orchids and white lies. The board chair, belly straining his cummerbund, took the mic first. "Visionary generosity," he boomed, sweat beading under the lights, voice echoing off marble like a bad sermon. The mayor followed, glass raised high. "Rock-solid marriage. Elijah and Simone. 40 years of unbreakable devotion." Elijah soaked it up, nodding humble, hand over heart, eyes already scanning for the next mirror to preen in. I lifted my flute when prompted, champagne flat and sour on my tongue, bubbles mocking the fizz I no longer felt. I counted heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Guests swayed into the birthday waltz, silk and tuxedos swirling like a practice lie, heels clicking in perfect 3/4 time. I waited until the orchestra hit the crescendo, until every couple locked eyes, every phone was pocketed, every breath held for the cake cutting. Then I stepped to the nearest highboy, crystal flute gleaming under the spots. I clinked it once. Ting! Sharp as ice cracking across a frozen lake. Laughter stuttered. A fork clattered. A glass tipped. Heads turned like owls on a wire, necks craning, pearls swinging. Lights dimmed to honeyed amber, spotlights narrowing on the dais like Judgment Day. The massive screen behind the three-tiered cake flickered. First our wedding photo, 1985, my veil a cloud, his grin triumphant, then snapped to sterile white. First slide bloomed. Elijah and Margaret feeding swans in Zurich, time-stamped 4 weeks ago. His arms snug around her waist, her head on his shoulder, swans ignored, breadcrumbs forgotten in his free hand. The image was crisp, 4K betrayal, pixels sharp enough to cut. Gasps rippled outward, a wave starting at the front tables and crashing to the back bar. Cousin Lydia, pearls always too tight, lipstick always too red, dropped her clutch with a clack that echoed like a gunshot in church. Pearls scattered across marble, rolling under patent heels, pinging off champagne flutes like tiny white accusations. Someone whispered, "That's not Simone." Another choked on caviar, hand to throat. A phone flashlight flicked on, then off, as if light itself was ashamed. A board member's wife clutched her actual pearls. Real ones this time, knuckles white. I stepped forward, gown whispering like a secret finally told, remote warm and alive in my palm. My voice, calm, steady, cut the hush like a scalpel through silk. 40 years I was the frame. Tonight the picture changes. I clicked. Slide 2. The $1.2 million wire to the Margaret Trust, Cayman Registry, memo line glowing, charity partnership. Slide 3. Lake House deed, signed in Elijah's flourish. Slide 4. Vineyard title, now his alone. Slide 5. Paris hotel receipt, honeymoon suite. 2 nights, 1 occupant listed as Mrs. Vance. But the photo showed Margaret. The show accelerated. Click, click, click. Hotel receipts from Santorini, Napa, Tokyo. Love letters scanned in Elijah's looping scrawl. Your skin at 80 outshines her at 60. I count the hours until your touch. Simone is wallpaper, darling. You are the art. Each image flashed faster, brighter, merciless. The screen a strobe of ruin. A junior partner fumbled for his phone, live tweeting before he realized the Wi-Fi was jammed, thumbs frozen mid-tweet. A senator's aide dropped her notepad, pages fluttering like white flags. The orchestra faltered, violins squeaking to silence mid-note, cello bow frozen mid-stroke, conductor's baton trembling in mid-air. Silence heavier than any music pressed down, thick enough to choke on, thick enough to taste, metallic, electric, final. Elijah stood beside the cake, fondant roses wilting under the spotlight, face drained to the color of old ash. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound. His hand reached for the table edge, missed, knuckles knocking a flute that toppled and shattered. Crash! Crystal exploding like the first crack in a dam. I let the quiet stretch, let it bruise, let it brand. Then I smiled. Small, real, terrible. The kind of smile that doesn't ask permission. The kind that ends dynasties. And somewhere in the back, Amara's disguised reporter hit record. Elijah lunged. Chair legs screeched across marble like a dying animal in its last throes. Metal on stone, raw and ugly. His face twisted, purple-red, veins bulging at the temples like live wires under skin, eyes wild, pupils blown, the way they got when a deal slipped through his fingers. He clawed for the projector cable, fingers splayed, nails scraping the white tablecloth, leaving red trails where his manicure caught. "Turn it off!" he roared, voice cracking into something between command and plea. Jamal materialized from the left, charcoal suit crisp, one hand planting firm on his father's chest, palm flat, lawyer calm, but knuckles bone white on Elijah's lapel. "Not tonight, Dad," Jamal said, voice low, steady, the same tone he used in court when he knew he'd already won. Elijah shoved hard. Jamal didn't budge. Stalemate. Father and son, locked in a tableau no family photo would ever capture. Business partners yanked phones from pockets like lifelines in a shipwreck. Screens glowed blood red under the chandeliers. Vance Enterprises, 12%, 18%, 27%, 34%, 41%. A venture capitalist, the one who'd toasted Elijah's Midas touch not 10 minutes ago, swore, Jesus H. Christ. Thumb scrolling so fast the screen blurred into a crimson smear. His wife's diamonds clinked as she clutched his arm, nails digging in. Sell. Sell now, she hissed, voice cracking like cheap porcelain under a boot. Another partner, silver-haired, Botox frozen, stared at the ticker, mouth slack, champagne dribbling unnoticed down his chin, staining his white tuxedo bib like blood on snow. A junior exec fumbled his phone, dropped it, clack on marble, screen cracking in a spiderweb that mirrored the empire. Elijah's mother, Evelyn, pearls choking her throat like a noose of privilege, lavender lace trembling, swayed like a sapling in a Category 5. Eyes rolled white, knees buckled with a soft theatrical thump into the mayor's arms. Her lavender scarf fluttered like a surrender flag in slow motion. Someone, Delphine, maybe, produced smelling salts from a sequined clutch, fingers shaking so hard the vial nearly slipped. The sharp ammonia sliced through gardenia, oude, and panic, smelling like defeat in a tiny glass vial, sharp enough to wake the dead. The mayor fanned her with a program, sweat beading his brow, muttering, "Breathe, Evelyn, breathe, come on now." His tie was askew, his dignity slipping with every frantic wave. I stepped forward, heels clicking once, twice, click, clack, deliberate as gunshots in a cathedral. My voice, still calm, now edged with 40 years of swallowed screams. 40 years of, yes dear. 40 years of being the frame while he painted himself the masterpiece. Thanksgiving 2009, I said, and the room froze harder than the ice swan. Elijah stood at the head of this very table, carving the turkey with that silver knife his mother gave him, and called me his charity case, because I served store-bought pie from the grocery on Elm Street. A cousin gasped, hand to pearls. Delphine's manicured fingers flew to her mouth, rings clinking like tiny symbols of shame. He laughed. You all laughed. I smiled. I always smiled. I smiled while the kids asked why Daddy was mean, and I smiled while I scraped burnt crust from the pan so no one would notice. I clicked the remote. Next slide. Margaret's medical records, dementia diagnosis, circled in angry red, signature shaky loops collapsing like her memory. The offshore trust, $1.2 million, funded by an 80-year-old woman who sometimes forgets her own name, forgets her grandchildren, forgets she already signed the check yesterday, forgets she gave him the lake house last month. I let the word land. Theft. Generosity or theft? You tell me. The word hung. Ugly. True. Echoing off crystal and cowardice, bouncing from chandelier to champagne flute. Federal agents in tuxedos, invited as +1s to the charity auction table, stepped from the shadows like avenging angels in patent leather and earpieces. Badges flashed gold under the spots. Warrants rustled like dry autumn leaves in a gale. Elijah Vance, the lead agent said, voice flat as a gravestone, step away from the table. You're coming with us. Financial fraud, elder exploitation, tax evasion. Cuffs glinted, cold final. Click-clack. As they opened, the sound swallowed by the ballroom's sudden vacuum. Amara, still in caterer black, lifted her phone high like a torch. Live stream on, red dot pulsing like a heartbeat. Vance down trended in 6 minutes flat. Notifications ping 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 like machine gun fire across every screen in the room. Her grin was small, sharp, triumphant, eyes glittering like broken glass in moonlight. Say cheese, Dad, she whispered, just loud enough for the mic, just soft enough to cut deeper than any shout. Elijah turned to me, face sallow as old parchment, eyes pleading, mouth working soundlessly like a fish on dry land. "Simone, please," he whispered, but my name sounded foreign in his mouth, like a word he'd borrowed from a language he never learned to speak, never cared to pronounce right. "Please what?" I asked, voice soft, lethal, closer now, close enough to see the sweat bead at his hairline. "Please pretend. Please disappear. Please keep smiling while you rob an old woman blind and call it love." He had no answer, just the tremor in his lower lip, the quiver in his chin, the way his hands opened and closed like he'd forgotten how to hold anything real. Security, 2 ex-linebackers in crisp suits, took his elbows with practiced gentleness that wasn't gentle at all. They marched him past the ice sculpture, a swan now melting into tears, wings drooping, beak dripping onto the parquet in fat, clear drops that looked like repentance but weren't. Guests parted like the Red Sea, silk rustling, no one daring to meet his eyes. A board member's wife turned her back, literally, shoulders rigid. Delphine stared at the floor, pearls suddenly too heavy, lavender lace sagging like wilted pride. The mayor, still cradling Evelyn, looked away. I remained center stage, indigo gown glowing under the spotlights, queen, not ghost. The silence roared. Crystal trembled in sympathy. The chandelier above flickered once, twice, as if bowing to the new order. And for the first time in 40 years, the roar was for me. Not the wife, not the shadow, not the charity case. Me. The board vote came at 3:07 a.m. Us emergency session crackling over speakerphones and cold coffee in half-lit boardrooms. I watched the live stream on my phone from the hotel bed, volume low. One by one, hands rose, faces grim. By sunrise, Elijah Vance was stripped of CEO, name yanked from the letterhead like a scab ripped off too soon. The press release pinged at 6:07. Leadership transition effective immediately. Mr. Vance steps down to pursue personal matters. I closed the app, set the phone face down, and exhaled a breath I'd held for decades. Margaret called me herself, voice clear as winter bells. She sat in her sunlit study, silver hair pinned back, lawyer at her elbow sharper than any scalpel. She revoked every gift, every deed, every dollar. Her pen scratched across legal paper, steady, deliberate, no tremor. "He thought my memory was his playground," she said, eyes fierce, chin lifted. "I remember enough." She signed the last page with a flourish, then folded her hands, knuckles white but unafraid. I heard the lawyer exhale. Margaret smiled, small, satisfied. The smile of a woman reclaiming her garden. I packed the mansion in 43 minutes. One suitcase, navy, scuffed at the corners. My mother's folding easel, the one she'd carried to every picnic, every hospital room, every quiet rebellion. I rolled it down the grand staircase, wheels clacking like a heartbeat. The orchids still drooped in their vases, petals browning at the edges. I didn't water them. At the threshold I paused, hand on the brass knob. The house smelled of lemon polish and endings. I closed the door softly. The gate sighed shut behind me with a metallic clunk. I didn't look back. My shoulders didn't sag. They straightened. The riverfront apartment smelled of fresh paint, lemon polish, and possibility. Windows faced east. No curtains, no shadows. Sunlight poured in every morning, pooling on bare oak floors like spilled hope. I opened every window, let the breeze carry out the scent of new beginnings. I set the easel by the largest pane, unfolded it with a soft snap, and stood there barefoot, paint under my nails, heart wide open. I hung the first canvas on the longest wall. Indigo shards forming a breaking crown, jagged edges catching dawn. The paint was still wet in places. I let it drip, let it scar, let it speak. I stepped back, arms crossed, and felt the crown settle on my head, invisible but heavy with truth. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of finally holding the brush. Former staff sent quiet cards in plain envelopes, no return address. The maid who'd ironed Elijah's shirts for 15 years wrote in careful cursive, "We always saw you, Mom. The way you protected us from his moods, the way you left extra pie in the fridge for us." The driver added a PS in block letters. "Your coffee was always better, and you never forgot my birthday." I pinned every note above the easel with thumbtacks, a paper constellation of witnesses. My eyes stung, but I didn't wipe the tears. I let them fall onto the floorboards, baptizing the new home. Elijah's rented studio overlooked a parking lot under buzzing fluorescents, cracked asphalt, and a dumpster that smelled of old takeout. His nameplate already removed, just 4 pale screw holes in the cheap wooden door. He left voicemail after voicemail, voice smaller each time, cracking on my name. "Simone, I can explain. Call me." I never answered. I deleted them one by one, thumb steady, heart lighter with every whoosh. Margaret hosted tea on her back terrace, wisteria in full bloom, china cups without saucers. She poured Earl Grey with steady hands, steam curling between us. We spoke of gardens, not men. "Peonies need full sun," she said, eyes twinkling. "Like women. Too much shade, and they forget how to bloom." I laughed, real, rusty, alive, the sound startling a sparrow from the feeder. She reached across the table, squeezed my wrist, her skin paper-thin but warm. We didn't mention him once. We didn't need to. Jamal won custody of the family foundation in a boardroom vote that lasted 11 minutes flat. He called me from the hallway, voice shaking with victory. "It's ours, Mom, the Lantern Foundation. First grant, art therapy for women over 40. Amara rebranded it before the ink dried. Logo a simple flame in indigo, website live by midnight. Applications flooded in, women writing in shaky handwriting. I'm 52 and starting over. I read every one, tears blurring the screen, but smiling through them. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in 40 years. No clenched jaw, no 3 a.m. dread, no phantom hand on my shoulder. Just river breeze through the screen, the soft hush of a city that no longer owned me, and the quiet certainty that tomorrow I would paint again. The Florence Gallery opened at dusk, white walls glowing under soft spotlights like moonlight on fresh snow. Fragments of indigo hung in perfect silence, 23 canvases, each one a shard of my 40 years. The first red dot appeared at 7:02 p.m. By 7:42, every piece was sold, dots blooming across every frame like poppies after a battlefield rain. I stood in the center wearing a midnight blue linen dress, simple now. No hidden pockets, no triggers, just silk against skin and breath in my lungs. A curator pressed a glass of Prosecco into my hand. I didn't drink. I just held it, felt the bubbles rise and die, like old habits. The unveiling of The Last Birthday came last. I pulled the silk cord myself. The canvas dropped into place with a soft thud against the wall. Gold light exploded from indigo ruins, shards flying outward in violent joy, a crown shattering into sunrise. The colors bled at the edges, still wet from the night before. The room inhaled as one. A woman in the front row, silver hair, linen scarf, pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, eyes shining like she'd seen her own resurrection. A young artist beside her whispered, "Dio mio," and wiped tears with the sleeve of his paint-stained shirt. I stepped to the small podium, envelope in hand, paper crisp from decades hidden in Elijah's safe behind the fake Rothko. My mother's letter, ink faded to sepia, but fierce as the day she wrote it. I unfolded it slowly, the crease crackling like dry leaves. The Italian translator stood beside me, voice soft, ready. I began to read, my voice steady, rising over the hush. My darling Simone, I always knew their cruelty would try to dim you, but I trusted your light would outlast their dark. I hid this money for the day you remembered you were never theirs to keep. I paused at the part about the secret account, the one Elijah never found. The audience wept in 3 languages, English, Italian, Spanish, tears falling onto marble like quiet, perfect applause. A man in the back row, tie loosened, shoulders shaking, wasn't ashamed to let them fall. That night, under the same gallery lights, we launched the scholarship fund, $1 million, seed money from my mother's account, and every sold painting. I signed the oversized check with the same indigo fountain pen, hand not shaking, wrist loose from years of finally holding the brush. The banner behind me read, "For women over 40, begin again." Applications poured in before dawn, emails with subject lines like, "I'm 52 and starting over." I left at 47 with 2 suitcases. Can I learn to paint at 61? I read everyone in the hotel bathtub, water cooling around me, tears mixing with Prosecco. I finally sipped. Elijah watched the live stream alone in his studio apartment, screen flickering across a face hollowed by regret and cheap fluorescent light. The reflection in the black TV bezel showed a man he no longer recognized, tie askew, shirt untucked, eyes red from unshed tears or bourbon, hand clutching a glass that trembled so hard the ice clinked like a warning. He muted the sound the moment I began reading my mother's letter. He couldn't bear the light, couldn't bear the sound of my voice saying I was never yours to keep. He closed the laptop with a soft click, sat in the dark, and for the first time in his life, felt small. I signed every painting from that day forward. S. Voss, maiden name reclaimed like a flag planted on conquered ground. The S curved bold and free, the period a full stop after 40 years of being someone else's footnote, someone else's Mrs. The gallery owner tried to add, formerly Vance. I crossed it out with indigo ink and a smile. S. Voss. That was enough. That was everything. Lantern Studio expanded to 10 cities within the year. Indigo flames painted on every door, every window, every heart. Each class began with the same words, spoken soft but sure, the way you speak to someone waking from a long coma. Your pain is pigment, your story is the brush, the canvas is yours. Women nodded, hands stained with color, eyes no longer downcast. One in Chicago painted her divorce papers into a sunrise. One in Lisbon turned her mother's old wedding dress into wings. One in Atlanta, 68, blind in one eye, painted with her non-dominant hand and titled it, Still Here. I visited every studio, touched every canvas, felt every tear and every laugh like brushstrokes on my own skin. Dignity is not given. It is forged in the quiet fire of endurance, hammered on the anvil of nights you thought would never end, tempered in the tears you refused to let them see. I know. I lived it. I carry the scars like medals under silk sleeves. True liberation is not the destruction of the cage. It is learning to paint the sky beyond it, stroke by stroke, until the bars disappear, until the only thing left is light, indigo, gold yours. And when you step back, canvas dripping, hands trembling, heart wide open, you realize the sky was never outside. It was always inside you, waiting for the first brave mark. And that is where the story ends. But really, it's where 1,000 new ones begin. Did you like my story? Tell me, what city are you from? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. If this touched you, if it made you feel seen, if it lit even a tiny flame inside, support me with a super thanks so I can keep telling stories like this. Your kindness means more than you know. Thank you truly for being here with me tonight. I look forward to your comments. I can't wait to meet you there. On screen you'll see 2 new real-life stories, powerful, raw, just like this one. There are so many more waiting on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on that bell so you never miss a light in the dark. See you in the next story. With all love and respect. My husband is always busy every night. Tonight is the same. I wonder why his work is so busy these days. Until tonight his GPS location is flashing. I decided to follow him, and then I was extremely shocked. I will make him regret it.